Some tenants in LA and Orange County could see changes to their rent. A new policy went into effect this week, increasing the limit on allowable rent increases.
And while it's a small increase, some renters may still feel its effects as inflation continues to create challenges for people's cost of living. So to tell us more about it is LAist housing reporter David Wagner. So good morning, David. You're going to break down this new limit for us. This is statewide, but how does this calculate locally for us?
Right. So, it was the first of the month just a couple of days ago. We all know that means that rent is due. This month also brought a new limit on how much landlords can raise rents every year. So this is all determined by the California Tenant Protection Act. This is a statewide law that puts that cap on rent hikes in most apartment buildings. The new limit in LA and Orange County is 8.9%. That is just a little bit higher than last year's 8.8%. It is down, though, from 2 years ago when inflation was driving that to the maximum of 10% under the state law. This is all based on inflation. So, when inflation goes up, so do these rent increase limits. And landlords say that makes sense. When inflation is high, their property maintenance costs go up, so they need to raise rents more. Obviously, increases of close to 9%, that's going to put a lot of strain on tenants who are dealing with inflation too.
Yeah, David, I want to ask you, who came up with this policy? And I'm sure a lot of people out there want to know who is covered by it.
Right, so this is all determined by state law. It's been in effect for a few years now, and it applies to apartment buildings built more than 15 years ago. So if you live in a newer building, your landlord might be able to raise your rent even more. On the flip side, though, there are a lot of people living in one of the dozen or so cities here in Southern California that have tougher forms of local rent control. So the city of LA, for instance, caps rent hikes in most apartment buildings between 4 and 6% right now. Again, this all depends on where you live. It depends on how old your building is. There are exemptions if you're renting a single family home. It's all really confusing. If you're struggling to keep track of it, we've broken it down for you in a guide that you can find on our website, LAist.com/rent.
Yeah, it is very confusing. So when tenants can't keep up with their rent, they can end up facing eviction. So many issues with that. We've also been reporting on LA County's efforts to provide free attorneys to those at risk of losing their housing. So what's the plan if that happens?
Yeah, so this would be the first right to counsel program in Southern California. Right now, renters don't have any right to an attorney in eviction court if they can't find one or pay for one on their own. And in practice, that means that more than 90% of them are going into LA courtrooms without representation, where they square off against landlords who almost always have a lawyer. The LA County Board of Supervisors recently voted unanimously to forward this. They hope it's going to keep more people housed and off the streets. It still needs a final vote before it's scheduled to take effect on January 1st. It's going to cost about $25 million to launch, and landlords say that money would be better spent on rent subsidies to struggling tenants so that they don't face eviction in the first place. This would only apply in unincorporated LA County, and it would only apply to people who qualify as low income. Other cities like San Francisco and New York have had programs like this for a while now. The city of LA is also considering a right to counsel program. A lot is happening on this front. Again, you can read more about it at LAist.com/rent.
A lot of good information. LAist reporter David Wagner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you can find all of the information we just talked about for these policies on our website, kcalnews.com.